All right, so we're going to start with a few of these YouTube comments from my first generation video games microgenre video that I did, and saying if anybody would like a second generation, that would be the 2000s decade, that I would be happy to do that. A few people have said yes, and I listen to the comments and I listen to you people, so here we go. Now, I don't want to give away the lead here, but there are some really low points coming up. So welcome to this episode of Microgenres, a sequel episode of sorts. I did that previous video with the first decade of video game adaptations. That was the 1990s, and now we're going to look at the next decade, the 2000s, the aughts. Does anybody ever say the aughts anymore? I don't know. It was just the 2000s. You know what I want to know is after the 2000s, it's the 2000 teens? The 2010s? It's the 2010s, right? Because then it's the 2020s. Anyway. Movies that are based on video games have a really tough rap, and for good reason. There are plenty of examples of that in this video, but there are some pretty good ones too, even if they are the exception. Now, there are 21 movies on this list, but there are a few sequels, and there are some movies that we can lump together as a group to speed things up a little bit. Let's just get started. 2001, Tomb Raider. 2003, Tomb Raider 2, Cradle of Life. So leading off this decade is Tomb Raider and its sequel, Tomb Raider 2, Cradle of Life, and they try their best to bring to life what was easily the hottest new video game franchise of the day. Now, they get Angelina Jolie on her rise to superstardom in her career, and these action-based, family-friendly Indiana Jones tributes serve her well in that regard. But the question is, do they serve the games? Nah? I mean, Angelina Jolie was the hot star of the moment, and it makes sense for a Hollywood vehicle for her to be in that. Her dad in real life and shitty human being John Voight plays her father in the film too. I really like the inclusion of Rimmer from Red Dwarf as her butler. Her hacker friend that she has is a little lame, but maybe the weirdest inclusion in my mind was her fighting this giant robot sentry, like for practice, I guess, at the start of the film. Now, I'm not personally a huge Lara Croft fan, so somebody can correct me, but I don't recall any robots in the games, so maybe that's like a movie edition. It seems a little odd, like she trashes her own mansion, is just so rich she can fix it again, or it's hard to say. There's also a love interest for Lara in each of these films, and there's sort of these roguish Han Solo types for her to squint at. And they're pretty good quality actors. Like, at the time that they were coming out, I didn't recognize either one of these guys, but when you go back and watch them now, you're like, the first movie, you're like, is that Daniel Craig? Like, James Bond? That's pretty crazy. And in the second, it's Gerard Butler. Like, all right, fair enough. Good spotting the talent, I suppose. And then, as for archaeology, it leans into the magical monsters and huge set pieces, which are okay, but like most of the film, there's too much spectacle and not enough substance, I think. The director Simon West only made 2 other films, Con Air and The General's Daughter, and has gone on to direct The Expendables 2 and a bunch of other stuff in the action genre. It tracks then that the focus of these films would be more on the action elements and less on any actual sort of like puzzle solving or arguably tangible archaeology. I think that failing, unfortunately, has like aged these movies more than you'd probably like. Now, maybe it's also worth mentioning that in the first chapter, almost all of the movies were derived from either Nintendo or Sega Genesis game consoles, but arcade and PC games were rare. Now, here in this video, we not only have console generations to PlayStation and Xbox titles, but plenty of PC titles as well. Games were moving from cartridges to CDs. Tomb Raider was first released on Sega Saturn, PC, and PlayStation. These Tomb Raider movies, they're okay. It's like cheap fun, and I don't think they were ever meant to be more. They adhered to the game's mythology well enough for fans, I suppose. But I don't think that has served them well as a back catalog that people keep going back to. The more recent 2018 Tomb Raider, I think, was a great improvement, but that's out of reach in this video, not being part of 2000 to 2010. Maybe in a third video in the comments if you want to see that. All right, next up, Resident Evil. Now, Resident Evil is another premier PlayStation title, heavily inspired by zombie movies of George Romero, a survival horror game usually in the third-person perspective and building on tension as much as action or gore. The games start off in a house that you're exploring until the games open up in the second and third entries where the world opens up, so you're like exploring a full city. Raccoon City has been taken over by an outbreak of a virus, the T-virus. Engineered by the Umbrella Corporation. The game's main playable characters are usually the STARS. That's is an acronym for Special Tactical and Retrieval something something. So Chris Redfield or I don't know. Is Claire Redfield in the games also a STARS person? Anyway, they're sort of more tactical people. I played like the first, the second, and the fourth games. Maybe a little bit of the fifth. It's the one where you like punch a boulder, right? Yeah. I like the fourth one quite a bit though as well. With the Wii, you kind of had this sense like you were shooting at the screen. That was a kind of a nice inclusive element. It was really definitely based off of survival stuff, at least at the beginning. It was about, finding enough bullets and ammunition and things that you needed desperately to get through the game. It wasn't really like a Doom or like a first-person shooter where it was just more about the action. This was definitely more about finding a key that unlocks a door that gets you into another room and only have enough bullets to kill that dog or this thing or, When the games had a chance to transition from the game to the screen, the choice seemed really obvious, and indeed George Romero was tapped as the director. But after several script rewrites, the producers went another way, and we got this whole other thing, this monster of a franchise. There are 6 films in the series, but the 2000s, is it 6 or 7? Jesus. I think it's 6 films in the series, but the 2000s only have the first 4, so that's what we're going to look at here. The films are Resident Evil 2002, Resident Evil Apocalypse 2004, Resident Evil Extinction in 2007, and although I guess we could push into the next one, I will also include Resident Evil Afterlife from 2010. Resident Evil in 2002 was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who you might remember as being the director of Mortal Kombat from 1995. Talked about that in the previous video. That was arguably the best video game adaptation to screen in the 90s. Now, in the intervening years, he'd also directed Event Horizon and Soldier, which is a nice track record. It makes sense. So how does this hold up? Well, it's all right. It's all right. Superfans griped rightly about the changes made from the game, but the movie's all right, and it works as a movie with plenty of nods to the game. The main diverging point really is the main character, Alice, who is a complete fabrication for these movies, or a creation for these movies, and who the entire 6 Resident Evil movies in this franchise focus around and revolve around. It's Alice, played by Milla Jovovich. So the first movie mainly focuses on the house that is also the subject or the play area of the first game. And they go through the house at the beginning and into this underground laboratory called the Hive, and all of the first movie takes place in that situation. At the end of it, we get a teaser that the second movie might be out in a zombified Raccoon City, and Alice is out there, and when we get to the second one, that's exactly where it picks up. So when I first watched Apocalypse, I thought it was the dumbest movie I'd ever seen. In the first half hour, there's a cop in a miniskirt. Milla Jovovich's character has, within 13 hours, has got a new custom outfit, like it's tailored to her, and she makes her entrance by crashing her motorcycle through the second-story window of a stained glass window of a church. Like, no idea how she got the motorcycle up so high, and then she doesn't crash it, she lands it, and then they leave out the back of the church through a cemetery, not expecting the dead to rise as zombies, which they do because it's a zombie movie and there's a zombie apocalypse. And then later she runs down the side of a building for no reason. So yeah, I thought it was pretty dumb. But now in hindsight, I actually think it's all right. The plot is still pretty easy to follow, which in later sequels becomes a test of endurance with little to no payoff. This movie's got Mike Epps, we add Oded Fehr, and the Nemesis Project. which is pretty game accurate, I think, for the look of it. We get actual Stars teams in action. We're in Raccoon City, just like the games and just like the first movie promised us at the end, so that's okay. Anderson produces, but he doesn't come back to direct. The cast expands to include more characters from the games, and just like the promise of the games, the setting moved from a tight indoor location to an entire city to play in. And this is also the beginning of the idea that Alice has been experimented on and is now basically a superhero with superior fighting abilities and even psychic powers. Part 3 is Extinction. I think this is my favorite of the 6 movies. The expectations going in were super low, but the audacity of the development of the series to build it into a full-blown like Road Warrior, Mad Max type of post-apocalyptic world is such a great fit. Even the execution, it might be a little dry, it's in a desert, but there's just so much to enjoy. Not the least of which is the turning point in the franchise where the filmmakers embraced that these movies aren't about mimicking the games anymore. They were about Alice and her story of turning into a superhero. She's a clone, she's got psychic powers, regenerative abilities, super strength, etc. Now, it's pretty silly stuff, like Jovovich's outfit, which looks like a runway model outfit designed for fashion, more so than actual survival, and that style over substance seems to be like a trademark in this series. We still get some nods to the game, like Claire Redfield as a character or the Tyrant monster, but the continuity and post-apocalyptic timeline diverges from the game continuity in Part 4. Part 1 is probably the best of the movies in most metrics, but this is probably my favorite because it's so bold. The director, Russell Mulcahy, is what gives the movie its legs or pedigree, and in my opinion. Mulcahy is a criminally underappreciated filmmaker, in my opinion. A giant killer boar movie with Razorback, badass. The first 2 Highlanders he did, and The Shadow in 1994 with Alec Baldwin, all super fun. Mulcahy also had a nice run of music videos. If you watched my series on The Mummy, he did 2 Mummy movies. Neither is particularly great, but they were enjoyable. I liked them. Extinction ends with the promise of Alice and an army of her own clones coming after the Umbrella Corporation board of directors. And that is an impressive, really cool storyline that is thrown away within the first 20 minutes of its sequel, Afterlife. So let's talk about Afterlife. Afterlife comes out in 2010. So I could have put it at the end of the video because it's the end of the decade, but I just wanted to keep these all together, so let's just do this now. The first 15 minutes teases us with this Moonraker heights of absurdity that would have been to see a team of Jovovich clones waging war against Umbrella, but all the clones get wiped out, and they also take away all of her powers and make her a human, I guess. The thing is, this just doesn't seem to matter very much because Jovovich continues to do arguably superheroic stunts and defying conventional physics like usual, so you just find yourself asking, like, why do you even bother? Like, this is a theme, actually, if we went past this movie, of giving her powers and taking her powers away and revealing things that are not shocking in the slightest and feel like, why'd you take 6 movies to get here? They never give her a backstory until it's too late and you don't care, and it really becomes kind of glad that I don't have to talk about the last 2 because they are just exhausting to watch. There's an odd pattern that forms in this franchise where they tease a sequel at the end of the movie and then they give you the very next scene in the opening sequel, only to then jump past that and into some other plot, completely throwing away what we were waiting for. Like, one of them is it the last one? The second to last one, the 5th one, I think, ends with us on the roof of the White House fighting against hordes of zombies, and then when you get to the 6th one and you think that's what you're going to watch, it ends up being like, yeah, that was something that you didn't get to see, now let's have a really boring, tedious movie, which is just disappointing. The Resident Evil films are pretty good at simulating a video game experience, like scenes of each movie employ waves of bad guys, physical terrain to traverse, plot mechanics that are often built around getting to an area with supplies, with exposition like cutscenes that carry us from one action set piece to the next. There's always a map. He's always doing the map thing to show us the size of our sandbox, and it's about as engaging as watching somebody else play the game, which is to say, not very. At least in the video game, you get to exert some kind of control and engagement. With the Resident Evil films, they just assume that watching it is enough, and I think the human element is what grounds a story, and each Resident Evil film gets further and further away from a human element story. Everything becomes abstract and nonsensical, but it never seems to do anything but serve mindless action scenes. I mean, I don't think the movie's ever even explained this guy. Not that it seems like it really needs an explanation, I guess. Like, why is he so big? The T-virus makes zombies, right? And zombie birds and zombie dogs and the Nemesis Project. Okay, fine. They just make monsters. But, like, why is he wearing a sack on his head? Where did he get it? Like, did somebody make that giant hammer? Like, where would you get a hammer like that? Like, that's not off the rack at Lowe's or something. But it doesn't really matter. Just enjoy the explosions and the zombies and stop thinking so much. Oh, and the 3D was annoying to watch at home because I'm not getting the 3D treatment, so any of the movies where stuff's flying at you is just reminding you that you're not getting that aspect of it. But we can go lower. All right, it's time to talk about the bowl in the room. The Uwe Boll in the room. There are 7 video game adaptations that Uwe Boll directed between 2003 and 2007, and none of them are good. None of them are well written or finely crafted. They don't adhere to the lore established in the source material, so fans tend to hate them with a passion. They fail at the box office every time. Boll's films are so reviled that he once challenged his online critics to a boxing match, and he beat the crap out of all of them. That's a real thing. It really happened. You can look it up. I bet you it's still online. Now, the movies in question here, the 7 that we're going to lump together, are House of the Dead in 2003, Alone in the Dark in 2005, Blood Rain in 2006, Postal in 2007, Blood Rain 2, Deliverance in 2007, In the Name of the King 2008, and Far Cry in 2008. I have seen them all, but I just want to lump them all together here, okay, so we don't have the excruciating details of how much they all suck and why specifically. But if you want that, if you really want to torture me, if you want me to suffer, you could let me know in the comments. I will likely ignore those comments for my better health, but you never know. I could be feeling sadistic and masochistic and feeling like I need to torture myself. I've seen them all already. I could talk about them, but, you know, they're all bad. The question is, really, why did he get to do so many movies? Why did he get so many opportunities when the movies were all critical and box office disasters? Well, it's a capitalism problem, right? It doesn't really matter if the product's any good as long as you invest your money where the tax loopholes pay off. Boll's German tax write-off was 100%, which means even when the film makes nothing, everybody gets their money back. Yay! So you pad out the cast with tons of name and face actors to try and bring people in. But look at the cast of In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale. Jason Statham, Leelee Sobieski, Burt Reynolds, Ray Liotta, Matthew Lillard, Kristanna Loken, Ron Perlman, John Rhys Davies, Claire Forlani, and still the movie made $13 million against a budget of $60 million. Now imagine that the movies made were actually good movies, right? Money makers instead of a free pass to waste everybody's time. Maybe tax incentives like this to encourage good art being made would be more popular, right? I never really thought about it until now, you know? Like, what's a good example of that is Cube, right? It's the Cube was funded through a Canadian arts program, I believe. It spawned sequels. It's a science fiction mainstay in film. Nothing Boll ever made will be revered in time unless it's like as a camp, like a bad camp classic, you know? And that's cool, but if you had just made some better movies, like, why didn't you just try a little harder? If you watch movies like, I really like House of the Dead, the first one, I own 3 copies of it. There's a director's cut. It's ridiculous. Anyway, if you watch that, like, it's so bad that the tracks, the dolly tracks as he reverse, they're in the shot. Like, you see, it's so badly made. Anyway, many of his productions are also made, like House of the Dead and Alone in the Dark, Postal, and In the Name of the King were filmed in Vancouver. I know I always say that. This time it doesn't feel so good to say, but they can't all be winners, right? They're still filmed here. After filmmaking, Bowl opened a restaurant also in Vancouver called Bauhaus in Gastown that closed in 2020 during the pandemic. Okay, next. Doom, 2005. We got another stinker here. This is one of those, like the Uwe Bowls, where it seems like the filmmakers had no idea what the game was they were charged with adapting. Doom is one of the most successful of the premier first-person shooter games. It first came out in 1993 and has spawned a whole bunch of sequels. I didn't play that much Doom as other people, but I am that generation. Like, I played Wolfenstein 3D, I remember the God mode of Rise of the Triad with dial-up modems, or Duke Nukem 3D. I wasn't particularly very good, but I played enough Doom to get the gist of it. The innovation of the first-person shooter games is moving throughout a 3D environment, and during this time you'd interface with 2D animated monsters. And while the limitations of Wolfenstein, the predecessor to Doom, made it so that you can't jump or go up a ramp or have any vertical movement, Doom at least allowed ramps and stairs to give the world a little bit more dimension. Now, the monsters all looked like refugees from an 80s metal record. There's imps and demons and barons of hell, but in our movie, it's just like the most generic, uninteresting designs. I feel such aliens envy coming off of this production. The Marines traveling to an outpost and finding monsters overrunning the place. But this has no charisma, no cleverness, no design genius. Nothing even close to it. It literally looks like they just took over a set from a different production and shot their own movie there. That's how generic it feels. There's no Doom Marine, that's the guy on the cover of the box who you really don't see much because it's a first-person shooter. There are special ops guys, but they don't have the same armor or helmets. And actually, it's worse than just not being authentic. Their black tactical gear looks entirely generic as well, and mostly modern realistic armor. Again, like they got the rights to the movie and then they just went to the wardrobe department and put together stuff that was already there. The movie stars The Rock, who's really young and like he's really thin and he's got hair, which is a little unnerving now that we're so far in his career. Looking back, it's a little odd. Carl Urban is in it, totally wasted in the role in my opinion. Rosamund Pike is struggling to cover her accent a bit, but all of these actors are better than the material they're being given here. The video game was colorful, while this sad, generic sack of monochrome colors and no humor is what we get for a Doom movie. Everybody will mention the last 10 minutes of the first-person shot. There's a first-person shot where it's supposed to emulate the video game experience, but it's way too little, too late. It's a swing and a miss. It's a gimmick, and I mean, you hate the movie so much at that point. It's not a saving grace. It's just some icing on a shit sandwich or something. Do people put icing on shit sandwiches? I wouldn't know. (2006) Silent Hill. This is one of the more successful titles on the list. There's a haunting theme that sets the tone of the movie, the concept being that a mom tries to find a small town called Silent Hill because her daughter is sick or going crazy, and she thinks that they might have the solution. Silent Hill is an old mining town where nobody lives anymore, and once there, these air raid sirens go off and the world changes and morphs into this nightmare world. Everything rusts and rots and decays, and monsters and cultists run amok. The world keeps dividing between the dark world and the light. The light world is all sort of old and decrepit, but in the daylight it just looks like nobody lives there, like an old ghost town. And at night, everything corrodes into rust and oozes and monsters come out. So you get these two distinct worlds playing against each other like a reflection, like a dark reflection. I think this is an exercise in visual style and atmosphere. It's a total mood-based horror, and it's exceptionally, it excels in that area, in my opinion. The cast features Sean Bean, Rhoda Mitchell, Alice Krieg, Laurie Halden. They all fill out a strong cast, and for how much computer-generated stuff is necessary for this to work, it did work pretty well. I mean, I think it still holds up for today for its ambience and the grotesquerie. The story's simple enough to keep you hooked, and the dynamic visuals make most scenes a really enjoyable experience. The game's core element is its mood and visual style, this foggy, dreamy, if not totally nightmarish landscapes and architecture. Sure, there's a plot, but the visceral visual experience, I think, is what is like most effectively brought to the screen here. To this day, it's a standout on the list. Like, truly, it has the right idea of leaning into the visual fabric of the film and letting that play out on our nerves so that the plot doesn't have to explain itself too much. That there is a plot if you want to follow it, but the visceral experience is where this movie excels and pleasantly prevailed in people's memories, I think. Similar to some video games where maybe the plot doesn't have to be the most dynamic because you can lean into the visual experience. Maybe a good example of this would be BioShock, where if you just play the game for the visceral experience of moving from one room to another and picking up items and surviving, it's an incredibly effective game. But if you wanted to get into the plot, you could start picking up all these old radio recordings or whatever, these audio logs, and listening to that and reading diary chapters, and there would be a lot more that you could get into. Now, there is a sequel that came out in 2012, but that's out of our designated decade, so maybe in a third video I'd cover it. It's not better than the first film, but honestly, it's okay for a direct-to-video. No, it's not even a direct-to-video. Sorry, it's not. It got a theatrical release. Okay, it's not that good, but there's supposed to be a third movie on the way. It's supposed to be in production as I film this right now, so maybe that'll pick things up. We'll have to see. Dead or Alive, DOA, 2006. Now, since 1996, there have been Dead or Alive games, which, similar to Tekken, were a new generation of 3D fighter games using polygons and able to move in a third plane of motion instead of just back and forth on the screen. You get what I'm saying? Like, you get to move this way rather than just forward or back. There have been a multitude of sequels for the game and spin-off games, including a beach volleyball version. The games are all bright and colorful and known for a liberal use of breast physics, which feeds into the volleyball game as well as the live-action movie. Now, I could pontificate on the flimsy nature of the plot of the ridiculous bending of physics in fight scenes, which is tacky and distracting when it's not authentic wuxia movies, right? It makes it feel kind of juvenile. But the truth is, I kind of like this movie. It's goofy, but goofy based on a goofy franchise is appropriate. This isn't Mortal Kombat. It's a worldwide fighting game with ninja princesses and wrestlers. It's filled with beautiful people in a vibrant, clean rendered world, and the movie brings all of that. There are 4 female leads, including Jamie Presley and Devin Aoki, Eric Roberts adding his deranged brand of spice to the mix. The locations are broad and feel like stages in actual fighting games. Honestly, even the lore and backstory of most characters seems to be honored here, so fans should really be happy for the most part. There's even a volleyball scene to give a nod to that particular spin-off. I mentioned DOA in the microgenre video games on movies that borrow from the plot of Enter the Dragon. There are quite a few in that video, like Mortal Kombat movie, which was in my microgenre video on the first generation of video games. And it's weird when videos overlap for me. So anyway, just check back on those videos if you want to see more or hear more about those. DOA isn't a serious game or a serious movie, and it's fun if you don't want to take it or yourself too seriously. The Hitman in 2007. Now, I would say that a big chunk of the games that are on this list that were adapted to movies are third-person perspective games. Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, and Hitman. It crosses genres from action-adventure to survival horror, and in the case of Hitman, stealth, I think, is the mode that it's mostly feeling. You play Agent 47, a bald assassin with a barcode on the back of your neck, and a black suit with a red tie. You plan your hits, and you take out your targets. Now, I'm not familiar with the director of the movie, Xavier Gens. He hasn't done anything else that I'm familiar with, but I do recognize one of the producers, Luc Besson. And Besson is better known as a director of The Fifth Element and The Professional, among others. But he's actually even a more prolific producer, with all kinds of Euro action movies like The Transporter and District 13, Kiss of the Dragon, Unleashed, and Taken movies, but many more than you've never heard of, and quite a few that actually missed the mark. The writer, Skip Woods, who wrote this movie, wrote Swordfish, Wolverine Origins, the A-Team movie, A Good Day to Die. No, let's just stop there and look at the cast, okay? I love Timothy Olyphant. He's great, but you need a charismatic guy to play a charismatic character, not a bald skadoosh with a barcode on his head. Like, if you strip a character down so that gamers can put themselves in his shoes and feel a bit more immersive of an experience while they're playing, that doesn't lend itself too well to being a main character that we don't control in a movie, right? Doug Ray Scott, one-time Almost Wolverine, plays the cop, hot on Oliphant's trail, and Olga Kurylenko is also in it playing the love interest, I guess as the Russian president's mistress. There's some cool fight scenes, like a 4-way knife fight on the subway car with 4 bald-headed assassins, but for the most part, the aesthetics are incredibly superficial, and because the plot is delivered in such a clunky and dry way, it does really little to hold our attention, in my opinion anyway. But there's no controversy in saying that The Hitman sucks. It does beg the question, though, if it does suck, then why it got a sequel that apparently also sucks? But that's not in this decade, so we'll have to wait for that one. No, the real question is, which is worse, Hitman or our next entry, Max Payne? Max Payne 2008. So right after Hitman, we got a very similar type guy in a black suit shooting stuff type movie with Max Payne. Originally a third-person shooter game with bullet time, gameplay effects, and crime noir aesthetic as Max, a cop who goes searching for murderers of his family in this criminal underground. And that's more or less what you get in the movie, I suppose. Mark Wahlberg just furrows his brow and expects us to be intrigued, but we're really not. Mila Kunis is in it, but she's not great. Ludacris is in it. He's not great. Chris O'Donnell's in it. Yeah. Beau Bridges is pretty good. Give it up for Beau Bridges. But not enough to save this movie. It's just dull, honestly. The entire aesthetic with the endless CG snow and monochrome color palette and the hard-boiled detective thing, it's all very post-Sin City vibes. Nothing feels real. Like it's all a set or a green screen background. It's got a plot that doesn't explain itself until way after you're so bored you don't care. I mean, look at this poster. Deep-seated Sin City envy. Now, I really think that the movie just fails to tell its story in a compelling way. The most exciting component, in my opinion, is the demon Valkyrie things that show up as maybe hallucinations that are never really explained, and they're not in the game either, apparently. The entire movie's contrived and not fun or enjoyable enough to overlook all of these flaws. In these videos, I can't help but convey my personal feelings about a movie, but I really try and be more factual about the films and even doing my best to look at the positive aspects rather than focusing on the negative, which to me always seems really easy. Plus, I never played either of these games to have a sense of any nuance that might have been made like tributes to the games in the movies. And to get another perspective, I decided to ask a friend of mine what he thought of the two movies, Hitman and Max Payne, because he'd played both of them and whether one was better than the other. And I'm just going to read you his response. He says, "I think they are both equally disappointing. They are both based on amazing genre-defining games, and both adaptations are just boring and uninteresting, which is the worst sin a movie can be. Say what you want about the live-action Mario Brothers movie, but it's not boring and it is not uninteresting. So both equally bad and boring, and equally disappointing." I couldn't have put that more succinctly myself. Alright, and the last movie. Street Fighter, Legend of Chun-Li, 2009. Oh, this is a bad one. We're going to go out low. This whole thing, this whole movie is as wrong as you could get. Every action is a decision poorly made. The subsequent decisions afterwards, based off of those first initial decisions, only serving to make it even worse. Like, make a random detective guy Charlie Nash just to get a name drop, without anything else that makes him Charlie Nash from the game. But if that's what we got, don't cast Chris Klein. But if you're stuck with Chris Klein, don't let him do whatever this is.
His name's Bison. I've tracked him through 11 major cities on 4 continents and never come close, not once. This guy walks through the raindrops.
Of course, it's a front for Shadow Out. Bison's bringing crime into the neighborhoods to drive the land value down, and then he's buying it back up wholesale.
We gotta move on then.
And then we get Neil McDonough playing Bison? Alright, that's an odd choice, but okay. But why is he playing him with an Irish brogue? See, in the movie it's explained that his parents were Irish, but raised him in Thailand and then died when he was very young. So why does he have an Irish accent as a man? How does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. There's no sense. It doesn't make sense. But then it's not as weird as Bison ripping his daughter out of his wife's belly with his bare hands, like his pregnant wife, and he rips it out. I mean, just why? Like, what does this have to do with anything Street Fighter? Kristen Kruk, is it Kruk? Kristen Kruk is from Vancouver, which is where they filmed part of this movie, I guess that's what it is, right? And also filling out the cast is Michael Clark Duncan as Balrog, I guess. Moon Bloodgood is in it, and Robin Shou, who is maybe best known for playing Liu Kang from the competing fighter game movie adaptation Mortal Kombat. Also, he was in DOA playing one of the pirates, so he's kind of the king of the video game fighting game movie adaptation genre, microgenre. That's a thing. Honestly, I don't even feel there's any need to do some kind of screen comparison or example. Like, what would be the point? This is like the people making the movie never played Street Fighter before. Legend of Chun-Li is the doom of Street Fighter movies. Take that as you will. I'm really sorry that we had to end this on such a down note, but I mean, I can't lie to you. This is where we are. This was a stinker. A lot of these were horrible movies, but you come to me. You're watching my video, and I can, you know what? You're coming to me to watch this. You want me to put a positive spin on it. I can, just hold on. Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li is the best at being really, really bad. That's a thing, right? I mean, if you're looking for a really bad movie, like if you're looking for a good laugh or to watch a flaming train wreck, then there's few films that are going to deliver the way that Legend of Chun-Li does. See? That's sort of positive. What is it about video games that is so hard to translate successfully to the screen? It feels like the past 10 years have been giving fans more of what you would have expected having played the games, right? Stuff like Last of Us, The Witcher, or movies like Mario Brothers, who got it so right. So, I don't know, dare we see a third chapter of Microgenre's video game generations, 2010 to 2020? You let me know if you want me to do that in the comments. I'll see you guys next week.